Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Project Meteor sprint planning number 3, I think, and also a sprint review and sprint demo and sprint grooming and whatnot. I'm sorry, I'm a bit unprepared this time. I've been on sick leave last Friday and the whole weekend, and now I'm catching up on emails and everything. So I didn't have much time to go through the cards. So let me share my screen just for a bit. Here we go. Good. So we planned for our last sprint to achieve this amount of goals. These goals and all these cards should have been done by now, which doesn't seem to be the case. So let me ask first, do we have any demos for this sprint? Do we have any achievements?
Excuse me, yes. Team Shooting Star, we can demo. It's a little more of just sharing some content as opposed to like an interactive demo, but we can go through that today. And also, so this card, create flowchart for existing tutorial content, that is done, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be an additional column made for like sprint 3 or how we should actually be marking items as done or not. So I hadn't moved it yet, but it is actually done. You're muted.
That's good. Leaves an opportunity for me. Is it that everybody's supposed to move a card around if it's done? Or are we waiting for Tom to sign off and gonna move the card? Did we have that question last time?
I think we did that in chat.
Right.
I think what we should do is that everybody moves their own cards and they move them to the done column. And after the sprint, we just rename the done column to a sprint number X and then create a new done column for the current sprint.
Exactly. And I think the last we that you put in there is really an I, because you said we gonna rename the done column to blah, blah, blah. And what you really wanted to say is I gonna rename that, right?
Okay, yes.
Because otherwise it leaves questions for others again.
Yes.
Cool, thanks, right.
Great. So then I just moved it to done. I guess I should close it too, probably, right?
So something like this. So what about we get to the demo stuff? You have, Michael, you said you have something to share.
Yeah, sure. I can share this. So I'll share my screen, but also put the link in here. It's just like a document, basically, that everyone can look at. But let me share my screen. Great. So basically, this sprint, we wanted to figure out like how are we going to edit the content of the tutorial so that it like makes sense with Project Meteor. Basically, to go through it in a directly as it currently exists is a little bit awkward because there's some things that you're supposed to be doing manually that the whole point of Project Meteor is moving that into like an automation step. And depending on like how you went through it, it was just a little bit difficult to, as a group, define how exactly we wanted to edit things. So this sprint, we basically logged every piece of content that is available and decided whether or not we needed to like edit it for some reason, whether it needed to be removed entirely, or if it could be left unchanged, or if there was some additional content that we needed to add in order to like bridge some gap of content. So that has been done here. You all can look at this, add comments if you'd like. But we basically decided on the changes that we're going to actually do this upcoming sprint. I think the main takeaway that you can all get from this document is that basically our decision has been to essentially, the only changes we're really going to make are like rewriting the there's two types of content basically. There's content that is about a notebook and things that you'll still interact with and still perform as part of like the Elira tutorial. And then there are things that you used to do, but now are going to be automated. So we're just going to like divide that into like two separate sections where the person will go through the tutorial, explore the notebooks, do the model training, understand what the Jupyter Lab extensions are, how to manage their dependencies. And then all the other things that are behind the scenes will be like in a separate section and simply be rewritten to promote the fact that Meteor is doing it for you. So there's all these things that you used to have to do, but now that's being managed like via this automation of Meteor. And that's it basically. Any questions or concerns or problems with this idea of essentially just dividing the tutorial into here's what the person actually does. That's going to be the first thing that they're interacted with. And then there will be content at the end that says we've handled a bunch of stuff for you in the background.
How do we do that technically? Because I could either understand what you're saying as we're going to remove a bunch of things from the Elira tutorial, or I can understand it as we're going to create a tutorial that is reusing the Elira stuff, but that is really focusing on demoing Meteor capabilities. The first alternative feels not good to me. Right? If we take the Elira tutorial and remove a lot of stuff because we basically say, well, it's handled in the background by Meteor, then we're gonna remove content from the demo, which feels not right somehow. Or am I just having the wrong feeling here?
I think you're having maybe the wrong feeling because we're not going to remove anything. We are just rearranging it basically.
Okay. And is it that we will have like two parts in that tutorial then? If I'm using Meteor stuff, it's just gonna happen. Otherwise, if you're a human being and want to do all on your own, you need to do this and that step.
Kind of, yes. But I think we would remove this idea of, so this isn't something that we did not consider, that the tutorial would exist both for Meteor users and not Meteor users. It would simply be, here's this tutorial. Wasn't that really easy to do? Turns out there's loads of stuff that's happening in the background thanks to Thoth and Project Meteor and all of this. Here's what's going on behind the scenes. yes, if you are interested in doing it manually yourself, here's the old content that tells you how to do it. But I don't like that. That starts to get kind of convoluted at that point, I think.
I think, Christoph, maybe let me give you an example here. The Elira tutorial is quite extensive when it comes to how do I build the image, how do I integrate with ASCII CI and all these things. If you want to set it up like aside before a project Meteor was a thing. So we will basically, as I understand this, we are basically replacing those steps, how to create something deployable from Elira tutorials we're replacing it with a dependency on Project Meteor. The same way how we're replacing running manual pipelines with Elira or serving models from manual endpoints or whatnot with Sheldon or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because it feels to me like the Elira tutorial is covering a lot more than just building that thing and turning it into a presentable thing, right? I just clicked through it, but it's also on your screen. If you scroll a little bit up, I guess there's these do changes monitor app, right? Open issue and operate first, blah, 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 blah. So we create that endpoint. We have the capabilities to monitor that app. So there's pull requests coming into the tutorial that might have some metrics in them. That is something we display on GitHub. That's completely unrelated to Meteor. Then we have that monitoring thing, which is, again, completely unrelated to Meteor, because Meteor is just building and deploying all the things. But the tutorial itself covers more than just building and deploying.
Yes, I think one of the issues that we've come up against trying to make this all work is, yes, the tutorial is quite broad and covers a lot of things and covers things possibly beyond the scope of Meteor. It's like the question is should Meteor grow to encompass the scope of everything that's in the Elira tutorial, or should the Elira tutorial be edited to something more straightforward?
Yes, maybe I would not ask that question. Maybe it's just a reminder for us here. Exactly what you said. There might be two things that develop from here. We just should keep in mind that Meteor or the tutorial is not the same scope. So so that we are just a little bit careful of stuff that we do to the tutorial or to Elira, or to Meteor, because it feels like Meteor should not go into the direction of monitoring stuff and doing stuff on pull requests or something like that. That doesn't feel right.
Yes, I agree with that. But like deploying a Grafana dashboard, that seems like something that would be
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So anything that has to do with pushing to GitHub or interacting with GitHub seems to be not appropriate. But anything where we're deploying a pipeline or like a dashboard or any of these, or like an inference service, that all seems within the scope, given that it's defined by some configuration or something.
Exactly. And I think if we circle back through the Espresso series and figure out, okay, now we are doing changes to the Elira tutorial and we want to show how we handle these changes, then the question for us should be, what is the role or the service of Meteor in that case? So I've created a new model, I've created a new this and that. Does it go through Meteor again? But again, just questions I want to drop here somehow, somewhere, so that we can think about them later on. Don't need to answer now.
Okay. And yes, and to that point, we were discussing, I mean, as the project evolves and things, we can always, and that's why we don't necessarily want to get rid of things, just kind of rearrange it and rewrite it. And if we find that we need to change it again, I think that's fine.
Okay. Let's discuss the details in the spreadsheet or in issues, and we're not. And let's move on. for our
I also have some demos. But yeah.
you do great.
Yes.
Let's go on. Let's show it.
Yeah. So this is from. I'll share my screen. Let me know if you can't hear me or anything like that.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
That
I'm
was
trying
what you
to
need.
share my screen.
We can't
Yes.
see you.
Thank you. So is the screen sharing?
No. Yes.
No. Let me know
Slow.
as soon as it shares.
Sure. Now.
So we had from Team Comet, we had 3 topics, I think. Support Comet with Jupyter Pipeline, Jupyter Book Pipeline, have Jupyter Book S2I image deployed and trigger build pipelines. So there was this first card, I think, which was to have a pipeline which will build Jupyter Book based on some stuff. This is not completed. I still need to talk to the whole team, but I did some work on this. So if we see from what the work team shooting started was here they have on another tutorial they have completed and they deployed uh, the website, which basically looks like this. So it's been already shown last time. So it creates an image. So it creates Jupyter Book and then shows that. That requires 2 files, which is this config.yaml and toc.yaml, which is described in that issue. So currently I haven't worked on generating them, but we have a pipeline. So I'll show you that how it works. So our testing environment used to work on is working on PSI. Currently it's down, so I cannot show you the testing directly. So what I've done for now is push my code directly to production. It will not interrupt anything which is running in production. So that's why it took a little bit time to figure this out. So I'll show you from a demo, I guess. So suppose there is a new URL or a new repository which needs to create just Jupyter notebook books or Jupyter books HTML. What they can do, it will be based on that, based on the Meteor URL and all the website. But for now, just for testing, I have fallen to the issue. So you can create something called create Jupyter book. Let me check the spelling. Uh, and you create the issue. Once the issue is completed, there is AIC CI running, so it will trigger on this issue, send the webhook to the listener. The listener will start a pipeline. Hopefully, should have started a pipeline. So a pipeline starts. There are multiple steps on this. It will take some time. It's a little slow, but I can show you from the code. So there is a trigger which got triggered, as you saw, it is being listened by the ACV listener. And then there is this pipeline exclusively built for this particular task. Here, it is basically looking for the Jupyter Notebook issue creation. So it saw this issue, so it will raise that. There is a task which is performing this issue, which is the main important component here. So what's happening here is there are multiple steps in them. We'll go through that. It has an image which we created, and this I'll talk about it shortly. This will create a Jupyter book build that will create all the docs in underscore builds. That will be then moved to the docs and then commit and pushed, and a pull request will be raised. The only right now it will fail because this repository has it, so it will not fail. It should build and push something, but other repositories it will fail because there is no doc YAML or config.yaml. So those are the steps which are still need to be figured out. So that's why it's in WIP. So these steps will run in this pipeline. Oh, as you can see, it has failed. could not get the task. Okay, so there is some issue. So once this finishes, there should be a pull request, and this issue which was created, it should be closed by this. This was the first task which was handling this. So this is in work in progress, but still a lot of things needs to be done. Another topic which came out of this was how do we build this and put this into an image, or how would this be handled in an image so that it can be deployed on OpenShift. There were multiple options like adding it to PVC and all that. And uh, another issue came from that was to put that into an image. So based on this, there is another task created. So what it will do is uh, it will create an HTTPD container out of this build, and then it can be deployed directly so that the website can be seen. Say same procedure as the testing environment is down. I have to create this. So here you create an issue. Based on the issue, pipeline will be triggered. There's already one triggered. So in this, the what it checks for is the content that needs to be created into the HTTP container. Then it builds, then it pushes, and then you can basically pull that into OpenShift and deploy them. As of now, it's fixed. It is still this one is also still in work in progress. But essentially, you will have an image which can be deployed and will have the same deployment.
I have one question. So,
Yeah.
just like the S2I custom notebook image, we have a new image available that builds the Jupyter book HTMLs.
Yes.
The image is already available.
Yes, it's
Nice,
here
nice.
in called S2I Jupyter book in Talkstation. So this will build, and then you can have the image. But this secondary image is basically encapsulating all the content into an HTTP container, and then that container can directly spin up the website.
Nice.
So this coming to this image, this just has right now Jupyter book support. There are still scripts to be added to this so that it can directly work in local. It's working in the Tecton, because in Tecton you write the script and then image is used, and you can the work is done by that. But it's that if you want to use this as a local tool, then you have to add a few more components to that. So these were the three things which we were trying to achieve, but they're still in work in progress. If you have any questions regarding this, please ask, or then I'll move to the last topic.
Yeah, wait a second. I think it's due to the Jupyter book stuff, right? That we have the underscore config YAML and underscore talk YAML, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, nice. That's good citizens of the Unix universe. Thanks for that.
Any more questions? So I'll move to the last one. This is triggering the build pipeline. There is nothing much I have done on this. This is already something pre-existing, so just wanted to talk about that. So in AICV CI, normally this gets triggered based on GitHub events, but as we would be creating an UI and then triggering it via API request, we have also added that support. So what happens and what are the requirements and how it can be triggered is there is this event listener which is listening for that API request. It's called a webhook tag release. So it will just wait for this API request to be sent here. And that requires some parameters which are defined here. So we would require a JSON with inside the body, we wouldn't require reference type. So reference is if you want to build a certain tag or a mark or a branch. If it's a tag, we define it's a tag. If you want a branch, we define the reference tag is a branch, and then we give the name on reference, then the repository and the repository URL, and the default branch. Based on this will trigger the build, and the build will have the same flow of creating the container image and then pushing it to into a queue. But if the queue repository is not defined, it takes the repository URL and pushes it to .station / the repository name. So this is pre-existing, but last time when we discussed, we said we would like a support where only URL is provided and rest of the thing the pipeline will do itself. So that's the last part which is still missing here. So we will try to do that. We will query the URL, and from the URL we will create get all these references. But if not, then we'll put that in UI where user can pick which branch of which tag they want to build, and that should create this information. So if you have any questions on this, please do ask. That's about it.
So do we want to build the image? This is the image for the web server that will host the Jupyter book HTML, right? Or is this a separate image?
No, this is separate from the topic of Jupyter Books. This is the part of the Meteor, like the exact thing which Meteor will do. So it will create, given a URL, it should create the build image of that repository. So this will do that.
Good. So you're still hosting a web server. Like it doesn't matter if it's a Jupyter book, you're hosting Jupyter book HTML, but you'll still be running a pod using this image in Operate First or some other environment, right?
So this one will create the Jupyter notebooks, which basically run in Jupyter Hub, right? So this will, so in the Meteor website, when a user submits their GitHub URL, the URL will sends a post request to this event listener. This event listener will take that post request, use that URL, and query all the necessary requirements from it, build an image, which is an Jupyter Hub content image for that repository, then store it into queue or the internal registry. And I think that's the work it will do. From there, the other parts will be on the Meteor project, which will take that image and spawn up a pod. So this is the separate topic from Jupyter Books.
Good. Thank you.
I like it. Thank you, Harshad. Let's move on to another demo that we have kind of ad hoc here prepared, and that's gonna be Frido and his separately developed POC based on Amun and Argo workflows. So showing something maybe a bit different to what we've been working on, but maybe that's something we can learn from or integrate with, and I think it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. Disclaimer, I'm not following Project Meteor very closely, but we had a talk with Tom last week, and we discussed a few technical aspects, and it sounds to me that some things we do in Project Toad could be reused in Meteor. So I created a very simple application that basically demonstrates how a POC can look like. So can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So I will go to a repository with example. And this repository holds one directory that is book with config YAML and doc YAML. That's basically the stuff that you've seen with in Harshad's demo. Next, what I will do, I will run an API server. The API server runs locally on my machine, but it detects that I'm logged into an OpenShift cluster that has OpenShift templates correctly set up and can talk to OpenShift cluster to serve requests and schedule workflows. So even though I'm running the API server locally, it will talk to remote OpenShift. Now, what I will do, I will switch to API. The POC is called Moldavite, and here you can see some endpoints. The most interesting one is the build endpoint, and if we try it out, we provide information about repo URL. So in this case, I'm submitting the repo with the book example you saw earlier. Then I'm providing notebook path. That's the directory where the Jupyter book is located. Then branch where the book is present, or from which I want to build the book. And then I also provide TTL, that is time to live. That basically states how long the Jupyter book should be exposed to users. Now, when I click on execute, a new Argo workflow is spawned. And on the API, we see book ID. This is basically a unique identifier of book, and I will reference the submitted book with this identifier for the rest of the demo. What I can do, I can check status. So that's an endpoint where I can obtain information about the book build. So you see that the build is currently running on the backend, and you can see also additional information such as I think the most important one is host. That's where the book will be hosted. As you can see, the build proceeds, and the workflow on the background looks like this. So first, there is created a build when the Git repository that was submitted on API endpoints is cloned, and the Jupyter book is built. Then there is created an image stream, and there are other tasks that is basically creating service in OpenShift, creating route, so we can access the build book. Then there is created also browser. That's the container image that exposes the build Jupyter book. And here is created deployment config in OpenShift in this is demo, which will basically serve Jupyter book. So if we take a look at status again, we see that there is already exposed host, but it will not be ready yet. So you can go there, and the application is not ready. Also, we will not use HTTPS. So we will wait until OpenShift deploys the build image. But you can also see, you can see TTL that is decreasing. It states number of seconds for which the Jupyter book is exposed. So once it is exposed, you will see TTL being decreased each second. So you already see once it reaches 0, the Jupyter book is deleted from the cluster. You can also browse logs of the actual build process. I probably copied wrong. Yes, that's the host. So you can check logs of the build process, everything what's happening. So you see the Jupyter book was built. You can also manually delete Jupyter book, and that's about it. The last endpoint exposes information about the service. So basically what version we are running. If you take a look at OpenShift console and we try to find our book, you see it's deployed. So we will try to access it once again. And you see the Jupyter book that is built from the repository. One thing, the actual build process is mocked. because it requires running privileged containers. So it can be delegated to AICOECI as hashart basically show the build process. And you can find sources in CodeStation Moldavite API repository. And here you can find everything that is necessary to run the core business logic. I will provide also OpenShift templates for deploying the API service that is currently missing. You can also browse the README file. Do you have any questions?
Yes, a super short summary for this one is you have encoded some DevOps processes in an Argo workflow, wrapped it around with a RESTful API, correct?
Yes.
And you said something like the build process is mocked. That is from your point of view, but I guess I would rephrase it as the build process is done by the component responsible for building by a Tecton pipeline, just as what Harshard showed, correct? Or is the build really included in the Argo workflows?
Currently, the build is not included in Argo workflows, but Argo workflow can schedule the build process as demoed by hashart, and then the application can wait for.
Okay, so the Argo workflow task is basically creating a pipeline, a Tecton pipeline run, correct?
Not now, but yes.
But that would be the goal here, right? I freaking like that thing. I even like the name. Good choice.
Thanks. Any other questions? So I will share the link.
Oh man, and I need the corporate CI. Your shirt even looks like the project you just introduced.
Good. So thank you, Frida. Are there any other demos for this time?
There's no demo for our work stream, but there's like a quick update. I can just review what we did for the sprint. It'll be really short. So we were looking into setting up metrics for identifying some of the metrics that we have in place. So we started off creating separate issues for different type of data sources that we expect to be using. One is Google Analytics, and then one is Prometheus. So for this sprint, we focused on Google Analytics first, since we have the Jupyter book markdown and everything running upstream. So we tested it out ourselves. We forked all of it and tried to build it off of our repo. And we set up an account, taking Oinjala's help on using the Operate First account that we already have for Google Analytics. So we have a separate ID set up for Project Meteor, and we've added a data stream for this Jupyter book Elira tutorial. We tested it out with one of our branches and one of our forks. And I guess the main takeaway that we learned from trying this out and getting Google Analytics integrated with Jupyter book is there is currently an ongoing issue with the Google tag being incompatible with the newest versions with Jupyter book. So for every basically analytics that you want to sync up with your website, there is something called as a G tag, which is your Google tag ID, which is associated to your website. And that you'll just have to add it into your HTML page, and automatically the tracking should start. So previously it was the ID would start with something like UA and it has a 8-digit number or something followed. But now the ID is G hyphen followed by a set of numbers. So Jupyter Book currently takes the old version as far as what we have seen from issues. And we tested it out with like the new tags and it did not work for us. Whereas if we removed the Jupyter Book rendered website and just had like the blank regular HTML, the tag was working and we were seeing data coming in. We were able to like look at different data points. So that's the main thing that we've discovered through this sprint. Maybe there are some workarounds. I've also linked issues where this is being discussed upstream as well. So it looks like the problem is resolved in Sphinx, but it's not yet reflected in upstream Jupyter Book. It's still an issue that is open and we're sort of monitoring that issue, but maybe we can like figure out if there are any workarounds to do this as of now. But yeah, that's just an update on Google Analytics trying to track Jupyter Book hosted websites. We even tried putting in the G tag within the config.yaml. The 2 files that we have for Jupyter Book, there's an option to add that tag inside the config.yaml, but that did not work either. So yeah, that's where we're at with Google Analytics.
I have 2 technical questions to this. How do you specify the Google tag for different repositories? Do we require to change the config.yaml for every repository we basically try to build into a container?
Yes, I think that's how it needs to be done. You'll have a separate ID just so that it's tracking each website separately and the data coming in. So that's how we were doing it, like for, let's say, Akanksha's fork had one certain ID, Shrey's fork had like one certain ID. And we were trying to compare the two. Like Shrey's did not have the Jupyter Book rendered site, whereas Akanksha's did have the Jupyter Book rendered site, and it was collecting data for Shrey, but not collecting for Akanksha because Jupyter Book is currently not supporting that tag associated with Google Analytics. But yes, we would be having separate IDs as far as my understanding is.
Okay, so for every customer of Project Meteor, we would need to generate a different Google Analytics ID.
I think so, yep.
Okay.
So, so it depends. So if we are talking about like the main page of Meteor, like the web application, that will be common to all the customers, right?
Yes.
So there'll be one data stream for that. Now, when the customer adds their own URL, that will point to a different repository, and I think for that we'd need to have a different config .yaml because that will be a different Jupyter Book, right? And the way I see this is that we'll have a tag in the config.yaml that collects data for the entire website. So the number of data streams would be equal to the number of config files, which I'm not sure like how that will play out.
Can we have an issue for this and we can discuss the technical details on this one somewhere? Because that's gonna be pretty challenging to implement, I think, or maybe. We'll see.
Yep.
Good.
Here's another issue that we need to create. I understood that Red Hat is basically tracking my personal work. How do I opt out of that? Good.
How are we tracking their personal work? So the website would be hosted on our servers, right?
It's still their repository, and we're injecting some Google Analytics into their repository. So
exactly.
And we kind of allow them to, or we want them to be able to download the container image and use it whenever they want. So like we should provide a way to opt out of this or opt in to this.
Yeah, so I think like we should create an issue to discuss this. This seems like an interesting problem we didn't consider. But also like, so when we say we're gonna make changes to the config file, are we gonna do it on the user repository, or are we gonna do it in the pipeline that we are creating? So that's, I think it's also a question that we need to answer. So
Exactly. That is a matter of clarity versus user experience, right? If we want to play it well, as like we are all developers and we care about each other's, we would open a pull request with the changes that we're gonna need. If we say, well, we want a frictionless user experience, we're just gonna inject it during the build and that's it, done. But in that case, source and deployed software would be different. Do we like that? Depends on who you ask. If you ask me as a developer, I don't like that, because I have one single source of truth, right? But if you ask me as a user experience guy, yeah, cool stuff. Don't bother people, especially humans, with stuff that they don't have to care about. But anyway, the opt-out question will pop up at the moment where we show that thing. So either we're going to create a nice service description around that, like we're going to track your stuff, we're going to provide we're going to provide the information that we aggregated about you and your project to you. That could be one thing. So user has also a benefit, or you can simply opt out. Or I think at least in Europe you need to provide an opt out, and I think it is good behavior to provide an opt out. But that's the whole discussion basically summarized, I think.
yep, we'll create an issue. Sounds good.
Good. So let's move on for a quick sprint planning. We have 10 minutes left. Let's see what we can do in the time frame. Good. Sprint number 4. So we probably have some leftovers from sprint number 3, right? So what do we want to achieve in the first work stream, Shooting Star?
Yeah, so we have an issue in the to-do, which is basically edit content of repository to match the outline. So we define the outline in this thing that we presented this morning, and then we're going to go through and actually make those changes this week to the repo.
Good. For project, for workstream commit, I think our goal stays the same. So let's maybe refine those. We were able to trigger the build pipelines. We completed that. So let's copy these two over, and let's not define any additional goals for commit. And what about telescope?
I think we will also be continuing on the previous sprint work, which is configuring all the metrics. We have a bunch of issues that we've created based on last sprint. So yeah, we will be focusing on those as well.
Okay. Going through tasks here, do we have any additional tasks that we would like to pull into the current sprint? I think we're pretty happy with what we have for project for area commit. Michael, Hema, any suggestions? Any new issues? Anybody else has any issues? Or issues they would like to solve? Good. So that kind of concludes the sprint planning. That was fast. I like that. I have two major things that I would like to talk by the end of the sprint planning. First is we have a collision with thoughts. What's it called, Christoph?
It's a Scrum meeting we have on every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I thought it was going to work out somehow by sharing a little bit of the time because the last 20 minutes of this meeting, but obviously we we consume a lot of time in Meteor, so it's not going to work out. Question would be if we can shift around the Meteor slot a little bit.
So the suggestion is to shift the Meteor like by half an hour earlier. Is that going to work out for the US folks? Yeah, I know it's morning. It's going to be 8:30 for you.
Oh, it's really early, right?
Yeah.
That's fairly early on a Monday morning.
Why is that?
It's not impossible, but is there no, we can't move it back 30 minutes?
Back 30 minutes. When do we start? 3:30. Yeah, I think that is kind of okay. Then we have less American TOF people suffering from early time than American Meteor people. That's how it works in a democracy, I guess.
So it's like, no, this is the worst time. Like this? Ten a.m. US time.
Yeah.
4 p.m. European time.
Right, that works for
That
me
works.
at least. I don't know if anybody else has any other feelings about it.
If there are any complaints about this, let's put them down.
This is certainly better than 8:30 a.m.
Okay.
What's wrong with you people? Don't have kids or stuff?
We are the kids.
Checking on Marcel, and it seems okay. So let's do it this way. This and following events. Fill it in afterwards. And there's
Grazie would be.
second thing I would like to talk about. I'm not going to be present on next two sprint plannings. I'm on a PTO. So I'm looking for somebody to fill me in this role. Are there any volunteers?
I'm also out. Same reason. I think Marcel is back next week, right?
Yes.
But
it's
strong
gonna be his
advice:
first day.
don't make
No.
him the Scrum Master.
No. My reason for not making him a Scrum Master is that it's his first day after PTO, and that's my excuse.
My reason is he's a product owner and a bad Scrum Master.
Unless somebody is very interested in having the experience of doing it, I will do it.
Okay, we have a volunteer. Any other volunteers? There are two occurrences. You can split it into two.
Anand is raising his hand, I guess. Good.
Do you want me to take it? Like,
No, I'll do it. I'll do both of them. It's fine.
Michael doesn't want you to take it, so. Good. Thank you, Michael. And that's about it. Any concerns, questions, anything to bring up? Good. Thank you, everybody. Let's have 4 minutes back and see you online.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.